So as Stephen said, my name is Jacqueline Dulac and I'm a safety officer at WorkSafeBC. I have the privilege of visiting your workplaces, and it has been a real eye-opener for me to see how everybody does their work and how everybody handles health and safety at their work sites. And I am very pleased to be here to speak on behalf of WorkSafeBC and prevention officers, and to let you know a little bit about what we do and why it's important and how we connect with you out there in the workplace. So British Columbia's healthcare sector employs approximately 246,000 workers, about 11% of the provincial workforce. Every year, over 2,600 long-term care workers lose time from work as a result of a workplace injury. As such, healthcare has been identified as one of the 4 high-risk employers, along with forestry, construction, and manufacturing. This pie chart summarizes the types of injuries out there in healthcare, and you'll see that violence is the number 3 reason for injuries. And healthcare workers are among the highest risk of group for becoming a victim of violence in the workplace. Nurses' aides, licensed practical nurses, registered nurses, and community health workers are at highest risk for exposure to violence. The average time a worker is off from work following this type of injury is about 50 days. So that's a big chunk of your time to be off work. So how many of you have ever had or met a prevention officer out in the workplace? Okay. So there's a few of you. Many of you will in the future. Just to let you know, we are out there and we do come inspect your workplace. So this session is going to let you know a little bit about what we ask you and why we're there. So you must be wondering how client-centered care and all that you've heard in these past presentations actually fit in with prevention officer roles and safety in the workplace. And you've heard a lot about triggers and reactive behaviors and responsive behaviors. And I'm here to talk about the meaning of violence. And I know that this is a really harsh word. And we did some pre-meeting with our presentations, and we had a big chat about that. But it is violence. These behaviors that biting, kicking, scratching, shouting, attacking, we know these are response behaviors. We know that these are a result of unmet needs, but in the end, they are violent behaviors. The person may not be violent, but the behaviors are definitely violent. So this is what we look at WorkSafe. The definition is violence. Because WorkSafeBC is focused on the health and safety of workers in healthcare, we believe that client safety and worker safety go hand in hand. By understanding behaviors that are associated with dementia, individualized care planning is done that will in turn reduce the incidence of injuries at work due to violence. This session will give you an overview of the occupational health and safety law related to aggression, violence, compliance, officer health care inspections, and the role of prevention officers in BC. So how many of you believe that health and safety is law? Okay. Is it law? Okay. It is law. We've talked about it's a nice to have, but no, it's a must have. It is law. It is law in Canada that employers protect the health and safety of their workers. And we also have an overriding Health and Safety Act, which has many components, and we also have regulation. Those components make up health and safety law. So to just give you an overview of the Workers' Compensation Act 115 talks about the health and safety as it relates to employers' responsibilities. Employers are responsible for the health and safety of their workers. They just are. So that's your job as employers. But that doesn't leave the worker out of the loop. because the worker also has responsibilities. You're responsible for your own health and safety as well as your co-workers, which means you have to report hazards. This is not, I think I might report hazards. You must report hazards. And we're talking about reporting violence and those types of behaviors, aggression. Those are a must-do. You must report those. And also supervisors, frontline supervisors. When we're looking at healthcare and complexity of, say, Vancouver Coastal, the employer, who is the employer, maybe the directors, but the supervisor often comes down to the front line. So the supervisors have great responsibility. They're on the floor. They're connecting with the workers right there on the front line. So here's the definition, the big V word. Big scary word for everyone. But violence means the attempted or actual exercise by a person other than a worker, which means your residents, your clients, of any physical force so as to cause injury to a worker and includes any threatening statement or behavior which gives a worker reasonable cause to believe that he or she is at risk of injury. Now, for most of you in your healthcare facilities, it is your clients or residents who may be aggressive, but don't forget there's another component. There are family members and there are friends who also may be aggressive. And I've been out there in healthcare, and we have heard from employers and supervisors that they also have other issues. It's not only the residents, it may be a resident's family member who's aggressive. So these are things that also need to be taken into account. So we have some more under Section 4 of the Occupational Health and Safety Regulation. We have sections devoted to violence, and these sections talk about risk assessments. Employers must do a risk assessment in a workplace where there is a risk of violence. And that's not a nice to do, they must do it. Procedures, policies, and work environment arrangements must address elimination of that risk, or if not, and it's very difficult to eliminate aggression, so minimize. How do we minimize it? And employers must ensure workers receive education pertaining to the hazards that may be involved in their workplace, the policies and procedures, and their work arrangements. And the employer must ensure that workers report. So the big question, and when officers go out there and they do inspections and they write orders, and we'll talk about what that means in a moment, employers ask us, what does compliance look like? And there's not really a cookie-cutter answer I can give you, but there are some key things, and what you've already heard about really getting to know the residents and really looking at people from individual perspective. Everybody's different, everybody has different lives and different experiences, and they have different triggers. These are things that need to be looked at in the risk assessment. By focusing on client-centered care that includes assessment of aggressive behaviors, putting effective processes in place to minimize those behaviors, and educating workers, you will essentially be in compliance. It's that simple. So the overarching question is, has the employer eliminated or minimized the risk of violence as much as practicable? Practicable, that's kind of a funny word, and that's a word that I learned when I came into being a prevention officer. I thought, what on earth does that mean? To me, it means practical, practicable. It's the expansion of the word. So if so, how has this been done? What's been put in place? How is this communicated to workers? It's a key thing, is the communication to workers. And what are you asking workers to do? How are they going to provide care? So risk assessment is the first step, looking at each of the clients, how they present in the context of the disease, dementia. Has an assessment been carried out on admission? How expansive has that assessment been done? And is it an ongoing process? People change every day. Assessment needs to be ongoing. What questions does the assessment ask? Are resident client behaviors, medications, situation needs taken into account? Are triggers for violence present, and have they been identified? If they haven't been identified, is there a way to actually put something in place, such as a behavior log, as we've already heard about, to actually track behaviors and see how they're going when they first come in, and then getting the group together to talk about a team approach? So we also look at the risk assessment also looks at the physical layout of the facility and how work is being done, and not just by care aides and nurses, but we're also looking at housekeeping staff. We're looking at people that come and go to the department. They're also your staff, and they're also affected by acts of violence. Is there a violence policy? Does it also address family or friends of residents? How do incidents get reported? On what forms? Do you have forms available? Do they know what they go on? And who do they report to? What is considered reportable? A shout, a push, a bite or scratch, or by accident? What is considered reportable? Do all workers know? And this brings us to casual workers again. And casual workers make up a really important part of the workforce because they come and go and they're very, very useful to organizations, but they often get missed in the training. They get a quick shot training and in they go. Well, I've done this before, I work over here. But you know, casuals do need to know, like everybody else, what the risks are in their job from place to place. This means every employer supervisor is responsible when someone comes onto their site. Care planning, how's it done? And here we get back to the person-centered care. It's a team approach. It doesn't take just one person, and it's not, and we're talking about the employer must do, the employer must do. The employer must do, yes, but everybody is part of that process, providing information, giving feedback. Who knows best what Mrs. Smith needs? Everybody does. The care aide from last night, the RN from today, perhaps the housekeeper who said, I noticed something the other day. Does this make a difference? It could be all of you, and it should be all of you. Training is given to workers. Casual workers, very important. Please don't miss the casual workers. They're so useful, and they're out there, and they get injured too. Panic button alarms, are they needed? When we're looking at work arrangements, we've been to facilities as officers where we've seen different arrangements, panic buttons, personal alarms. It depends on your facility. I've seen facilities with enclosed nursing stations as a method of some kinds of barriers and controls in case people kind of get a bit much and there's a safe place for staff to go. You see this a lot in emergency rooms, and it's really great, not just for potential for violence and aggression in emergency rooms, but also infectious disease. So they're very useful. Supervision is a big one in healthcare, and when we look at compliance, we do look at the supervision aspect in a very big way, because workers may need supervision they do need supervision from time to time, but I know workers, you're very smart, you do this all the time, you don't need your manager over your shoulder. But wouldn't it be nice to know that someone's actually looking out for you and that your supervisor understands that maybe you're having a hard time and maybe you need a little refresher? And here we go with supervision for everyone. Everyone needs a refresher. How many are old school nurses that have been out there for years and years? 20 plus. 20 plus? I'm guilty. Okay. So how many of you thought from time to time, oh, I've done this before. This is old hat. You know what? We're always learning. And as the other speakers have mentioned, it's not about just learning and I'm done. It's ongoing all the time. And when you're dealing with people, you're dealing with individuals who have experience and who change from day to day to day. So our learning needs to go forward all the time. So communication of information. Here the big thing is communication. Well, I didn't know. How are things communicated? I like it when I go out to healthcare and I'm told that we have huddles, we have weekly meetings, we meet with GPAP, with the physicians. I like to find out what those communication processes are, because it's really key, because your frontline workers need to be communicated with continually, and it needs to be a two-way street. Incident investigations are very, very key when we're looking at compliance. I know it's paperwork, and that's just part of healthcare. How many of you love to do paperwork? Don't you wish you could just throw it all out? Yeah. But you know, when officers come in to look at your workplace, we do look at paperwork, because sometimes paperwork is the only way where we can really see, or one of the only ways that we can really see if things are being documented and reported and handled and followed up with. So incident investigations are key, and when we're talking about reporting incidents of violence, this is why it's so important. And who needs to fill out another incident investigation? But I can tell you, if your employer is diligent in following up with the incidents as they occur and meeting with the Joint Health and Safety Committee to discuss these incidents, this is when action happens. When you say, oh, I won't bother, nothing will happen, nothing will change, I believe that positive action will occur if incident investigations are followed up with, but they can't be followed up with if you don't report them. So they need to be reported. It's very key. Joint Health and Safety Committee, follow up and review. How many of you know who your Joint Health and Safety Committee members are? Here's a question for you. Okay. You know what I'm going to ask you to do is the next time you go to your work site, take a look at your Health and Safety Board if you have one at your work site. See who your Joint Health and Safety Committee members are. They're very key for you for health and safety of your workplace. Okay? Okay, I'm mindful of the time here. I've got some time. Okay, so what is an inspection? What on earth do we do when we come in as officers? We come in to inspect. So basically, I'll give you a little history, a short history. Typically, healthcare inspections with WorkSafeBC prevention officers were a more program approach. We would, say, meet with the health and safety advisor, the OC health and safety advisor, or the employer in an office, go through all the policies and procedures, ask some questions, and you know, healthcare policies and procedures, they all look pretty good. They look great, and you guys are the best for churning out paper. But what the heck does that mean? You have a violence policy. What does that mean? So program approach, they do have benefits because you can get to all the paperwork, but we really want the meat, and where that is out on the floor. So healthcare inspections became more a combination of a little bit of office out to the floor, because what we really want to know as officers is what is really happening out with the frontline workers. We want to hear you. We want to hear your voice. It's not just about what your supervisor or your employer tells us is really happening. And you know what? We do believe you. But we just have to really find out what's really happening from a worker perspective. It may be that employers or supervisors say one thing, but really what's happening on the other side, workers aren't being heard from. I like to think that everyone works together, but we do go out to the floor. So healthcare has assigned dedicated officers. So if you're an employer that is on the high-risk strategy, and we have certain employers that are identified that we do go visit twice a year for inspections. Other employers we just drop in. We actually we have response work and we have planned work. When we go out to our regular employers, that's planned work, but any worker or member of the public can call us in and say we have a health and safety issue, and we can just show up at your workplace. We don't make appointments, we just show up for inspections. We do make appointments if we want to do program reviews or come to meet with your joint committee for perhaps an information session, but generally speaking, we just show up. It's not always a good time. We know you're busy, everybody's busy, but we do that. So, just briefly, the inspection process, we meet with the manager or frontline supervisor, we ask for a worker representative, and then we go out to the floor. We ask questions. So we speak to workers, could be RNs, care aides, activity aides, physicians. We speak to dietary, housekeeping, and many others who come in and out of the department, social workers. Officers typically review examples of who may be a few of your aggressive clients, and we may ask the workers, how would you know this person is aggressive? Do you know what the behaviors may be? If you don't know, where would you go to find more information? We ask your employers, what do you do for casuals, for training? And we also look and see if there's any flagging systems. We look at your communication systems. How do you communicate that your residents or clients have any risk of aggressive behavior? So we look at your ADLs, paperwork, care plans, communication book. We look at symbols, and we've seen a range of symbols. Some healthcare facilities have purple dots that indicate that there may be aggression, and this is a way of communicating to other workers. So questions? Who are the clients who have a history of aggression acting out? Where would you go to find more information? When would you report an incident and to whom? How would other workers be informed, and casual workers? Flagging systems. And we ask, who's your team? Who gets together with you and talks about the challenges that you have with different behaviors? Is it GPAP? Do you use a PIECES program? In the community, is there community psych that comes in and assists? We ask these questions when we're out there doing inspections. I've got 2 minutes. When we finish our inspection, and hopefully we're in and out within 2 hours, we're sometimes 3 because it takes a while to talk to people and really get to the bottom of what we're looking for. So we deliver an inspection report. It's usually posted at the workplace so workers can see it, and it's brought forward to the Joint Health and Safety Committee for discussion. If there's any gaps in your system, or we call them violations of the regulation, or maybe your department needs a bit of work, then we do write orders. They're not fines in themselves. If they're repeat over time, they could be. But basically, there's strong instructions saying, hey, we came in, we had a look, we looked at your paperwork, we spoke to staff, we found some gaps. Here's how you can look at fixing things, pulling things together. And in healthcare in general, you're all doing great work. You're doing the right thing. You're keeping your clients safe and happy, and you're keeping yourselves safe for the most part. But quite often, these things just need to be tightened up. And this is when officers come in and find these gaps. We're coming from the outside, so we have a different perspective. We're coming from a safety lens. We're looking at the gaps, and we're saying, hey, we saw this. How about you tighten this up a bit? Lastly, we inspect and enforce the regulation. This is our Bible. This is a health and safety regulation, and this is what we work from. And this is available online so anyone can look at it. Okay, when we do inspections and we write orders, it's based on evidence that we find. And evidence comes from inspecting your workplaces, speaking to workers, speaking to supervisors and employers, and looking at your paperwork and your communication processes and seeing how you do your work and how you do it safely. We also consult and we educate. Employers may be working on some policies or some ways of doing things differently, and they may call me up and say, what do you think of this? We're happy to provide consultation. And for those employers who work with us regularly, you know that we have an open phone line. You can call us anytime. And we also educate. We can attend your health and safety committee meetings for a chat on responsibilities overall. I'm heading downtown for a cooking school to talk about safety in the kitchen. So we get all kinds of neat things. And this is response work, and we love to do it, and we're happy to do it. But our primary goal is inspection enforcement, but we're here to help, because health and safety is our job to ensure that the regulation is enforced and that you're all doing your job safely. And we want you to be able to communicate freely with us and feel that you can do so. So in summary, aggression and violence in the WorkSafeBC world are synonymous. Okay, the big V word, the behaviors, The aggressive behaviors, the responsive behaviors, they are considered to be violence and they're not acceptable. Compliance is based on the Occupational Health and Safety Regulation, and there was a Section 4 that is dedicated to that. Healthcare inspections involve discussions, conversations. It's not just about the paperwork. It's how you're really doing your work, and we want to see that. And prevention officers inspect, enforce, consult, and educate. So these are the resources for you. We have a website, and that's where you'll find this big book. And it's a great website, but you just have to learn to navigate around it a little bit. There's a lot of great information on it. And there's also a worker site on the website. There's actually a worker link. So anything to do with workers, if you want to know anything about what you need to know as workers, you can punch on that link and you'll get all kinds of information. There's a prevention information line that is manned Monday to Friday. And there's also the Dementia Handbook, and I did want to mention that because Industry and Labour Services has, or you did have some. They're all gone?
It's free online now.
Free online.
Along with all the videos.
So, yes, so I want to thank you for allowing me to be here, and thanks to ILS for asking me. And I hope this has been an eye-opener for some of you who don't know what prevention does, but we're here to help. Okay? Thank you.